Welcome to the night the swamp took them, a night when silence breathed and the fog crawled low across the poisoned earth, when the air above Pripyat carried whispers that didn't belong to the living. They were 200 Soviet soldiers dispatched under orders stamped in red to secure the marshes beyond the exclusion zone, places where the Geiger counters screamed and the light from their flash lamps broke against curtains of mist. The reports said it was routine, a patrol, a sweep, a measure of safety. But what they found was not radiation, not rebels, not wreckage. It was something else. Something that waited just beneath the surface. Something that watched. In the final transmission, a voice trembled through static shapes in the water. "They're calling our names." And then silence. No gunfire. No distress signal. Only the hiss of dead air. Days later, when the search team entered the swamp, they found helmets half sunk in mud, rifles tangled in reeds, footprints that ended abruptly, as if swallowed by the earth itself. There were no bodies, only ripples that faded too quickly, and an echo of voices drifting over the still water. Locals said the soldiers had not died. They had been taken, transformed by the curse that lives in those waters. For generations, they've spoken of the Rusalka, drowned maidens bound by sorrow, haunting rivers and swamps, luring the living with songs soft as prayer. They say when the moon rises over Pripyat, you can still hear them, the lost men singing in voices that aren't their own. So before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? And the exact moment this story chills your blood. Because once you step into these waters, once you listen long enough, the swamp might start whispering your name too. Autumn 1986. The wind over Pripyat carried the taste of rust and rain. The city was empty, evacuated, silenced, but silence never meant safety here. Windows gaped like hollow eyes, toys lay scattered in dust, and over the northern marshlands the mist thickened with every passing night. Official maps called it a containment zone, a dead sector marked in red. But among the few who patrolled its borders, whispers spread of lights that moved through fog, of melodies faint as breath, and of ripples on still water where no wind blew. The swamp was not silent, it was listening. A detachment of the 32nd Reconnaissance Battalion arrived under orders sealed by the Ministry of Defense. Veterans from Afghanistan, men hardened by fire and superstition alike. They were told to secure the exclusion perimeter, retrieve abandoned equipment, and log radiation anomalies. It was meant to be routine, a sweep through wasteland, yet as their trucks rolled past Pripyat's hollow buildings, something shifted in the air. They said the light here never changed, stuck in an endless gray twilight. Even the crows flew in silence. And though their boots struck the ground, the echoes never returned. They established camp near the Ivankiv Marsh, where black water met twisted trees like bones clawing from the earth. The instruments crackled in confusion, radiation spikes where none should exist. Cold zones forming circles in the mud. At dusk, the fog rolled in dense breathing alive, and sentries began to whisper of voices humming through the mist. Not radio static, not wind, but something melodic, feminine, and sorrowful. One soldier claimed he saw a pale figure waist-deep in water, long hair, drifting eyes fixed upon him, before it dissolved into ripples. Local villagers came the next morning, women wrapped in dark shawls carrying salt and candles, their faces drawn like old paper. They begged the commander to leave, to let the swamp rest. It remembers, they said, it takes what it is owed. They spoke the name Rusalka, spirits of the drowned, betrayed women bound to cursed waters. They warned that when they sing, the living must not answer. But orders came from Kiev, not from ghosts, and the commander dismissed the warnings as folklore. Though that night he ordered double sentries. The third night the mist came thicker, swallowing tents, muffling breath. Radios hissed, then shifted into a pattern like a song. Men rose from sleep eyes unfocused, walking toward the water. The commander shouted, his voice breaking against the fog. One man vanished mid-step, a splash, a ripple, then stillness. Another dropped his rifle, whispering, "She knows my name." Before stepping into darkness, by dawn, 6 soldiers were missing, no signs of struggle, no tracks returning, only their helmets floating upside down in the reeds. A coded transmission reached command. Personnel missing, anomaly confirmed. Days later, a second patrol entered the zone. They found the camp, abandoned maps, soaked rifles, bent Geiger counters blinking erratically. Footprints led straight into the swamp and ended where the mud gave way to black water. The ground was smooth, undisturbed, as though the earth itself had swallowed them. The officer in charge reported feeling pressure in the air, a hum in his skull like distant singing. That night, 2 of his men vanished without a sound. The incident was sealed as classified cause, listed as environmental hazard. Yet among intelligence circles, rumors took root of a Soviet acoustic device tested near the marsh designed to pacify animals, but said to emit frequencies that triggered hallucinations. Others whispered it was not the device that changed the swamp, but the swamp that changed the men. In declassified fragments, one scientist wrote, "The resonance persists, the melody is not mechanical, it remembers." Villagers near the exclusion zone claimed the soldiers had not died, they had been taken. On still nights, fishermen heard singing across the water, low, mournful, threaded with words no longer human. Some saw figures standing waist-deep at the edge, faces, pale eyes, blank uniforms, dark with rot. One man fled after recognizing his brother's voice calling from the mist. They said the swamp had birthed its own choir, a chorus of the lost. In 1991, as the Soviet Union collapsed, an investigative journalist entered the restricted area with a camera crew. Their last transmission described lights moving across the marsh, synchronized like lanterns beneath the surface. The footage was never released. Only a single page from their notes survived, the words smeared by rain. "The song grows louder. It wants us to follow." Years later, independent researchers returned equipped with modern instruments. But their compasses spun drones, failed mid-flight, and every recording carried the same anomaly, a faint harmonic voice embedded in static. One physicist swore the pattern resembled pre-Christian ritual hymns. He vanished 2 nights later, his boots found beside the water's edge, still warm prints stopping at the brink. By the early 2000s, the swamp had become legend, a place where silence hums and fog carries memories. Hunters who wandered too close found themselves lost in circles, emerging hours later with soaked clothes and blank stares. They spoke of women's laughter from the reeds, of whispers echoing their thoughts before they spoke them. Even animals avoided the boundary, wolves howled, but never crossed. Satellite scans from 2014 showed concentric ripples forming nightly, as if something beneath pulsed with life. Thermal sensors captured faint heat signatures, shaped like human forms, motionless, standing in shallow water. When approached, they vanished. Analysts logged the data, then locked it away under Rusalka zone unresolved phenomenon. Today, fences rust around the perimeter, warning signs bleached by decades of rain. The marsh lies quiet, or seems to, yet those who linger claim the fog still hums, that if you listen too long, you'll hear the melody rise. A lullaby woven from sorrow and memory, a song of soldiers who marched into water and never marched out. And some nights when the moon hangs low and the air grows still, a faint chorus drifts through the reeds, men's voices entwined with women's lament, singing not for rescue, but remembrance. A requiem carried by the swamp, echoing the names of those it claimed, forever. The official records began with a single entry, dated November 2nd, 1986. Reconnaissance detachment deployed. Mission perimeter sweep, anomaly investigation. Nothing unusual on paper, just another mission in the silence beyond Pripyat. But the logs changed tone after the 3rd night. Lines grew shorter, handwriting more frantic. Reports describing lights moving across stagnant water. Radiation spikes followed by melodic interference on radio channels. One transmission caught the attention of command, a voice whispering coordinates before dissolving into static, followed by what analysts described as a non-random harmonic pattern. Experts from the Kyiv Radiological Institute reviewed the tapes, concluding the signal could not be atmospheric, nor mechanical. It matched no known Soviet frequency, and yet it pulsed with rhythm, like a heartbeat beneath the noise. Internal memos classified the anomaly under code name Project Vodyanaya. A small science detachment was authorized: engineers, physicists, 2 medical officers. Their first report described the marshland as unstable, saturated with moisture beyond expectation, exhibiting unusual electromagnetic resonance. They noted that compasses failed, birds refused to cross the zone, and human subjects experienced auditory distortions. Some heard whispers, others music. 3 soldiers were transferred to Kyiv for psychiatric evaluation. All displayed similar symptoms: insomnia, tremors, fixation on water. One repeated a phrase during interrogation: "She sings when it rains." Another scratched symbols into the table, spirals resembling ancient Slavic sigils for river spirits. None could recall the moment they left camp. None could describe what they saw. Only one survived the winter. The official explanation listed psychogenic contamination. But behind closed doors, the tone changed. A sealed briefing warned of behavioral transformation linked to environmental resonance. One colonel asked if it was contagious. The scientist hesitated, then said, "Perhaps not in the way we understand." Archival documents uncovered years later revealed a series of acoustic tests near the marsh. A Soviet device codenamed Azimuth 3 designed to disperse fog through sound vibration. Deployed once, abandoned after anomalies in frequency feedback. No technician ever volunteered to return. The equipment was later found corroded, its circuits fused as if by heat, though no fire was recorded. In the winter of 1987, snow blanketed Pripyat, but the swamp never froze. Surface temperatures remained above zero, steam rising under moonlight like breath. Thermal drones captured faint signatures, human-shaped, stationary, half-submerged. Attempts to extract samples failed. Every probe corroded within hours, metal dissolving in patterns like acid burns. One scientist reported hearing a voice through his headset, soft, distant, calling his name. He removed the device and swore the sound continued echoing inside his skull. He was evacuated for evaluation, but vanished en route. His empty coat was later recovered on a roadside near the exclusion line. The local militia refused further patrols. Command sealed the area, labeling it Zone 13. All subsequent mentions were redacted. Files transferred to archives under the Ministry of Internal Affairs. For decades, the swamp disappeared from public record, a black mark erased by silence. Yet rumors persisted. Villagers spoke of pale lights drifting over water, of footsteps echoing without source. Fishermen claimed nets tangled in fabric Soviet-issue uniforms decades old. Some nights they heard singing, voices blending with the wind fading when approached. A melody no one could trace, yet everyone remembered. In 1991, after the Soviet collapse, independent researchers gained limited access. They carried Geiger counters, recorders, infrared cameras. The logs they kept were never published. Fragments survived describing pressure in the air heat, without fire shadows moving against gravity. On their final day, one note read simply, "They are watching from below." The team never returned. Declassified fragments from 1998 mention recovered tapes from the swamp perimeter. The audio contained harmonic waves consistent with human vocal range, layered atop subsonic pulses. Analysts suggested the sound could induce trance-like states. One referred to it as a lullaby of the earth. Another called it a resonance of grief. No agency claimed responsibility for further research. The site faded into myth, yet every few years a new report surfaced. Thermal imaging showing forms where no life should exist. A drone feed capturing ripples forming concentric circles pulsing in rhythm, like the breath of something sleeping, waiting. In the archives of Minsk University, a letter remains unsigned, undated, referencing baptism by resonance. It claims the missing soldiers did not die. They adapted. Their physiology altered by prolonged exposure to frequencies and radiation. Their minds synchronized to the melody of the swamp. The letter ends with a question. If the song binds the living to the lost, what becomes of the singer? Today, the official record stands unchanged, reconnaissance unit missing, cause unknown. But in the villages near the border, candles still burn by the riverbanks. Women whisper names into the mist. And when fog drifts from the marsh at dusk, old men say you can hear them, the soldiers humming softly, keeping rhythm with the heartbeat of the earth. Still marching, not home, but deeper into the water. They say the swamp was ancient, older than the villages that surrounded it, older even than the faith that named it cursed. Before Pripyat was built, before the reactors rose, this land was called Vodyanya's Vale, a place where rivers met and refused to part, where the dead did not sink but waited beneath the reeds. Old songs told of maidens drowned by betrayal, lovers cast aside, bound by sorrow, voices swallowed by the water yet never silenced. When the wind fell still, the elders said you could hear them singing, not for vengeance, but for memory. The Rusalka, they whispered, were not spirits of malice, but grief, women who once lived, now cursed to linger between worlds. They sang to the living, soft, sweet, sorrowful, drawing them closer to the edge, closer to the reflection that was never truly theirs. Those who followed would join the chorus, not as ghosts, but as echoes bound to the water's will, their hearts beating in rhythm with the tide. In the marshlands north of Pripyat, such stories were spoken only at dusk, never aloud near running water. When the reactors came, the people said the earth groaned, that the old spirits stirred beneath the steel and concrete. The marsh grew restless, birds fled, trees, blackened mist, thickened like breath on cold glass. Elders warned the engineers, you are building above a grave. The water remembers. But no one listened. Science did not fear memory, until memory began to sing. After the explosion, the villagers fled, but not all escaped. Some refused to leave their ancestors' graves. Others vanished in the mist, their names erased from the registers, but not from the whispers. The old women said the Rusalka had grown hungry again, fed not by sorrow alone, but by radiation, by the stillborn energy of a dying sun. Their songs changed lower, deeper, filled with echoes of machinery and heartbeat alike. Survivors told tales of seeing women rise from the water, their hair floating like black ribbons, their eyes hollow and shining green. They carried no malice, only longing, reaching for the living, not to harm, but to share the silence beneath. Men who gazed too long felt the pull, not in their bodies, but in their souls. They walked willingly into the water, whispering names no one else could hear. In the nearby villages, charms of iron and birch were hung above doors. Salt was scattered at thresholds. Songs were forbidden after sunset. For in these lands, melody was invitation, and every echo carried a name. Children were warned never to play near the marsh, for if they heard a voice singing their lullaby, it meant the water had chosen them. Some elders claimed the Rusalka were not alone. They spoke of Vodiani, the old water god keeper of drowned souls, master of currents and silence. When angered, he sent fog to swallow villages whole. When mournful, he sent rain that never ceased. In times of great sorrow, he opened the gates below, and the Rusalka rose like mist from their tombs. During the years after the reactor's fall, the fog came more often, thicker, heavier, carrying shapes within. Men saw faces in the mist, pale, familiar watching. Women swore they heard footsteps circling their homes, though no tracks remained. And every spring, when the thaw came, new bones surfaced in the mud, old uniforms clinging to them, metals tarnished but intact. The people built shrines of stone along the water's edge, offerings of bread, milk, and candlelight. They whispered prayers to calm the restless, to guide them home, or keep them sleeping. But the soldiers who vanished never returned, and the marsh, they said, had learned new names. In 1992, a priest ventured into the zone with a small cross and a vial of holy water. He claimed faith could silence the song. He was never seen again. Later, a hunter found the cross half buried in the mud, twisted, blackened, humming faintly when touched. Those who live near the border say the Rusalka no longer sing alone. Their chorus now carries voices of men, low, deep, echoing commands turned into laments. Some believe the soldiers joined them, willingly drawn by sorrow too heavy to bear. Others say they were claimed punished for trespass upon sacred ground. Whatever truth lies beneath the water guards it well. No body has ever surfaced. No grave has been marked. Only ripples remain concentric, eternal, like the heartbeat of a god that refuses to die. They say if you stand at the fence on a windless night, and the mist parts for a moment, you'll see them, figures standing in the shallows, eyes lifted to the moon, lips moving in silent hymns. And if you listen too long, you'll hear your name among theirs. That's when the song becomes invitation. That's when the swamp remembers you too. This was not the first time the earth sang, nor the first time men vanished into places that breathed. Across centuries, in lands divided by distance but bound by silence, echoes of the same story surfaced again and again. Soldiers who marched into mist. Fishermen lost to waters that whispered their names. Voices heard where no wind blew. In Belarus, near the Narak marshes, villagers spoke of the lake mother's spirits that rose with the fog, singing lullabies older than scripture. In 1943, a German patrol disappeared during a winter campaign, leaving only rifles stacked neatly by the shore. The official record listed severe frost and disorientation, but locals said the lake had called them home. Farther north, in the forests of Karelia, hunters feared the shining pool circles of still water that reflected no stars. They said anyone who saw their own face in that mirror was already lost. In 1951, a Soviet hydro survey team reported hearing voices beneath the ice, rhythmic, pleading, almost human. Their equipment recorded vibrations not from the surface but from below, as though something beneath was knocking, waiting to be heard. In Poland, near the Bug River, legends spoke of the drowned choir, a chorus of monks who vanished during the wars, their chants still rising through fog-laden dawns. Fishermen swore they heard hymns echoing through reeds at sunrise. Scientists blamed temperature inversion sound, bending through layers of cold air, yet even they admitted the melodies carried Latin words long forgotten. Across the Carpathian valleys, shepherds told of nights that hum, when hills vibrated softly, and flocks refused to graze near certain streams. During Soviet geomagnetic surveys, instruments malfunctioned at these sites, recording subsonic tones below human hearing. Technicians called it earth resonance, but old men whispered a different name, the breath of the drowned. The motif repeated waters that remember, songs that summon, disappearances marked by stillness, not struggle. In Asia Minor, Ottoman archives describe soldiers lost near Lake Van, their armor recovered, their bodies never found. Pilgrims claimed the lake was guarded by sirens, whose laments mirrored the cries of the bereaved. In Scotland, tales of the Selkie told of souls caught between land and sea, human by moonlight, captive by tide, calling lovers to join them beneath the waves. Even in the frozen north, where myth yields to ice, explorers of the White Sea recorded strange harmonics within sonar pulses that mimicked human heartbeats. They dismissed it as geological resonance, until one diver reported hearing a lullaby through his regulator, a voice humming in a tongue older than his homeland. He surfaced, trembling eyes vacant, refusing to enter the water again. Patterns emerged, sound intertwined with sorrow. Loss echoed through melody. Places marked by tragedy transformed into living memory. The folklore named them differently. Rusalka Noken, Lorelei, Siren, La Llorona, yet each tale spoke of water that hungered not for flesh, but remembrance. They took the lonely, the grieving, the ones who listened too closely. Modern science tried to trace these motifs to map myth upon geography, and found unsettling alignments. Ancient settlements built near fault lines and deltas, burial mounds beside rivers known for fog and frequency, cathedrals erected over springs that hummed at dusk. Where tragedy pooled, stories flowed, and always there was song. In archives from 1926, a Russian ethnographer recorded villagers near Pinsk describing the singing marsh. At night, they said it hummed with the voices of soldiers who perished in the Great War. The ethnographer dismissed it as superstition, until his own journal ended abruptly mid-sentence, "I hear them now." No further entries were found. The bridge between folklore and fact grew thinner with each account. Infrasound studies revealed that low frequencies could induce unease visions, even the illusion of voices. Psychologists called it suggestion. The faithful called it proof. Yet the symmetry remained. Places scarred by sorrow resonating like hollow instruments translating pain into song. Perhaps grief itself was a frequency, one that lingered after death, one that called to those attuned to its pitch. And in Pripyat's swamp, that pitch found its perfect chord radiation, silence, memory, all vibrating together until the boundary blurred. Reports from as far as Japan's Aokigahara forest echoed similar tales, whispers between trees, footsteps behind the living songs that led wanderers deeper into the green silence. The names changed, but the voice was always the same, ancient, patient, calling. Across oceans in the bayous of Louisiana, fishermen spoke of the wailing water, a place where Confederate soldiers drowned their cries, still echoing through fog. Instruments recorded tones near 19 hertz frequencies known to stir the human eye into seeing shadows that weren't there. But locals said science named the effect, not the spirit behind it. So the question deepened, were these songs illusions born of grief? Or was grief itself alive, weaving through air and water, choosing voices to carry it forward? Every tale, every disappearance, every ripple whispered the same refrain, that the earth keeps what it remembers, and the water it never forgets. As the decades passed, investigators of the Pripyat anomaly found comfort in comparison, as though shared mystery softened its terror. But those who stood at the swamp's edge, who felt the hum beneath their feet, who heard the faint melody threaded through static, knew this place was not echo but origin. Here the song began, and here it continued, waiting for another listener. And so the bridge stretched from myth to man, from sorrow to science, a chain of whispers looping through time. Different languages, same lament. Different faces, same silence after the song ends. The silence broke not with a scream, but with a sound, a frequency so low it trembled through the static of a forgotten tape. When engineers played it back, expecting noise, they heard something else, a rhythm deliberate and measured like a heartbeat beneath water. They slowed, the recording filtered the distortion, and beneath the hum emerged fragments of melody notes, rising and falling with sorrowful precision. Then came the whisper, faint, almost human, A name spoken once, then twice, until the technicians realized it belonged to one of the missing soldiers. His voice, or something that wore his memory, calling from a place no signal should reach. The ministry ordered a retrieval team, 12 men, 2 scientists, 1 priest sent to the coordinates pulsing in the transmission. They moved through fog thick as wool instruments blinking erratically, compasses spinning. Hours later, they reached the source, a clearing in the marsh, perfectly circular water, black as ink. The Geiger counters screamed, then died. Their radios filled with distant singing, soft, layered, many voices entwined. One scientist knelt touching the mud, whispering that the ground felt warm as though breathing. The priest crossed himself and began a prayer. When the fog lifted, he was gone. What remained was a journal sealed inside a rusted ammunition box, recovered half-buried at the water's edge. The pages were warped, the ink bled like veins through paper, yet the words were legible, frantic, trembling, desperate. The song is closer now. It knows our names. We tried to run, but the water follows. Another line read, "She sings through the wires," not from the marsh, from inside the radio. The final page ended mid-sentence, the pen stroke dragged downward into darkness. Analysts dated the last entry to the very hour the patrol vanished. The journal was locked in a lead container archived in a sealed vault. Yet the guards assigned to the storage room began reporting strange phenomena, faint humming through the walls, footsteps echoing when the corridor was empty. One night, a watchman recorded the sound on his phone, a melody muffled, distant, but undeniably human. Hours later, he disappeared from his post. His flashlight was found at the doorway, still on beam, pointed toward the vault. A satellite scan, conducted days after the recovery, revealed a new anomaly, concentric ripples forming across the swamp, expanding in perfect rhythm, repeating every 13 minutes. Thermal imaging detected human-shaped signatures standing motionless within the circle, tall, upright, evenly spaced, but when drones approached, the figures dissolved into mist. On the shore, investigators found footprints pressed deep into the mud, leading from the dry ground into the water, and stopping abruptly as if the walkers had simply vanished. Further analysis of the recovered tape brought another revelation. Audio technicians isolated layered frequencies, discovering faint traces of human heartbeat patterns embedded within the melody. Each beat matched the recorded pulse of one of the missing men from their medical files, identical rhythm, identical spacing. The conclusion was impossible. The voices were not random echoes. They were the men themselves translated into sound. One scientist, upon realizing the implication, refused to continue. He left his office muttering, "They're alive in the song." 2 weeks later, that same scientist was found in his apartment bathtub, water filled to the brim, recorder clutched to his chest. The device played a looped whisper, "Join us." No sign of forced entry. No note. Just a wet outline on the floor where footsteps should have led away. The ministry declared the project terminated, but a classified memo surfaced later marked "Eyes Only," stating, "Containment unstable. Resonance spreading beyond zone." Investigators monitoring nearby wells reported increased electromagnetic interference, accompanied by low humming, audible only at night. Locals began complaining of dreams filled with singing voices calling them by name. Some woke standing at their doors, barefoot, facing the direction of the swamp. In 1994, a research team from Minsk returned, driven by rumor and curiosity. They set up sensors, cameras, recorders, but the data defied reason. Shadows walked across infrared without bodies to cast them. Water temperature fluctuated in pulse-like waves. One night, the lead technician dreamt of standing waist-deep in black water, surrounded by faces he recognized from old photos. When he awoke, his boots were soaked and mud clung beneath his nails. The footage from that night showed his tent empty at midnight and untouched until morning. Among the most chilling discoveries came from a submerged artifact dredged by accident, a helmet marked with Soviet insignia, inside of which was sealed a reel of film. Developed under heavy protection, the footage showed a soldier's face illuminated by torchlight eyes, wide whispering words no one could translate. Behind him, the surface rippled, and a pale hand emerged from the water, resting gently on his shoulder. The frame burned black immediately after. The swamp grew restless again. Wildlife fled the perimeter. Satellite images captured increased activity, ripples forming geometric patterns glowing faintly under moonlight. Scientists dismissed it as interference, but one analyst pointed out the impossible symmetry. The ripples formed the insignia of the lost battalion. The pattern repeated every year on the anniversary of their disappearance. By the early 2000s, rumors spread of hikers lost near the exclusion line, their last messages describing singing through the trees. Rescue teams found their clothes folded neatly by the water, personal items placed in perfect alignment, as though laid out for inspection. No footprints led away. In one recovered camera, the final image was of fog rising over still water, and faint figures reflected beneath the surface. Those who dared to listen to the old recordings reported vivid hallucinations, visions of soldiers standing in the reeds, hands outstretched, mouths moving in unison. Some claimed the song carried meaning, not a lure, but a message, a warning. Others insisted it was invitation, that the lost sought company, not victims. Either way, every listener described the same final sensation, a pull soft but irresistible like gravity in the heart. Government denials could not silence the whispers. Independent archivists leaked fragments of the melody online, distorted, looping, incomplete. Within hours, listeners reported headaches, vertigo, and dreams of drowning. One file carried embedded coordinates pointing back to the swamp. When investigators arrived, they found a speaker half buried in mud still playing the tune, though no power source remained. By 2010, the marshland was fenced with electrified wire warning signs written in 3 languages. Yet trespassers continued, drawn by obsession, curiosity, or something deeper. Few returned. Those who did came back, changed eyes, distant voices, low humming, without realizing. Medical scans showed elevated auditory cortex activity synchronized with frequencies matching the original tape. In 2014, seismic sensors detected tremors emanating from beneath the swamp, steady, rhythmic, not tectonic. The intervals matched the tempo of the song. Analysts coined a term, harmonic breathing, a pulse that seemed to expand outward each year. Some feared the resonance was growing, that soon the melody would no longer be confined to water. The final report, stamped in red, concluded with a single line, "Containment impossible." The choir is expanding. It was the last document filed under Project Vodyanaya. After that, the archive went dark, yet the swamp remains. At night, when fog drifts across the reeds and the moon hangs heavy, those who stand too close swear they hear it, a song rising from below, layered with voices human and not whispering names swallowed by history. They say if you listen long enough, you'll hear your own name too, and when you do, the water will open. And somewhere beneath the surface, where light cannot reach, the choir grows louder. The soldiers still stand, the melody endless, waiting for the next verse. They say silence is peace. But here in the shadow of Pripyat, silence breathes. It lingers like fog, heavy and slow, moving through the hollow buildings and the reeds that whisper in the dark. The fences still stand rusted, broken, their warning signs faded into pale ghosts of words. No soldiers walk this path anymore. No voices echo across the marsh. Only the wind carries a hum too low to be mere sound, a hum that feels like memory or mourning. Beneath the surface, the swamp waits, still, black, unbroken, a mirror that reflects nothing yet remembers everything. The archives remain sealed, buried deep below the city, their tapes coiled tight, reels of magnetic breath holding a song that refuses to fade. They call it an anomaly, a resonance. But those who've heard it know better. They say it is grief made audible, a hymn for the lost, a choir of voices that never found their way home. Perhaps it began as science, the collision of radiation and sound, the earth itself vibrating with sorrow. But somewhere along the line it became something else, something older, something awake. The water remembers, and in remembering it sings. It sings of soldiers who marched into the fog and never returned, of names swallowed by silence, of hearts that still beat somewhere beneath the surface, echoing through the mist like distant drums. The villagers still light candles by the riverbanks, small flames flickering against the dark. They whisper the names of sons and brothers, lovers and friends, sending their memories out across the water. Sometimes, when the night grows heavy and the moon hides its face, the flames lean toward the swamp, as if answering a breath. And from the reeds comes a song, faint, sorrowful, human, layered with voices the living no longer claim. No monument stands here. No stone bears their story. Only the water holds their reflection, shifting, and broken eyes open in the dark. They are not gone. Not entirely. They have become something in between, not ghost, not man, a living echo that hums beneath the earth, waiting for those who will listen. And if you stand at the edge too long, if you let the stillness seep into your bones, you'll feel it, a vibration low and steady, aligning with your heartbeat. A whisper threading through the mist, soft as a sigh. It calls to you by name, gentle at first, then deeper, until you no longer remember whether you are hearing it or becoming part of it. Maybe that's how the world remembers, not through monuments or history books, but through the places where sorrow sank too deep to die, through songs carried by the earth itself, through echoes that outlive their origins. Perhaps the soldiers did not perish. Perhaps they were rewritten, translated into melody. Their voices stitched into the breath of the swamp, a requiem without end. And so the song goes on, an endless refrain, woven through fog and water, a memory too heavy to drown. It waits in the silence, beneath the hum of the earth, beneath the heartbeat of the world. If one day you find yourself standing here, and the mist rises around you, and the air grows still, listen closely. You may hear them, the choir beneath the water, singing the names of the forgotten. And somewhere between one breath and the next, you might hear your own, because the earth keeps what it remembers, and the water never forgets. You've just heard another file from Classified Chronicles, where silence speaks and memory sings. If you wish to uncover more, stay and listen.